The Russo-Japanese War was a war fought between Japan and Russia in the early 20th century. Starting with this article, I will explain each battle. The basic strategy of the Japanese forces was to use the full force of the combined fleet to annihilate the Russian Lushun fleet in Lushun or blockade it in Lushun harbor and seize control of the Tsushima Strait. The Navy will then transport the army safely to the Korean peninsula. The First Army, led by Kuroki, landed on the Korean peninsula and drove out the Russian troops in Korea, while the Second Army, led by Oku, advanced into the Liaodong Peninsula and isolated the Russian troops holed up in the Lushun fortress. Then, with Nogi's Third Army and Notsu's Fourth Army, the goal was to defeat the Russian army in Manchuria and capture Vladivostok. The Navy then set a goal of destroying the Lushun fleet before the Baltic fleet arrived in the Sea of Japan. The Russians assumed that the Japanese forces would land in southern Korea. They intercept the Japanese forces moving north. If they were allowed to move northward, the strategy was to retreat slowly and eradicate the Japanese forces that had cut off their supply lines. The Russians also followed this policy in their fight against Napoleon and Nazi Germany, and it is considered to be the traditional Russian way of fighting. Instead of forcing a decisive battle, the Port Arthur fleet decided to refrain from fighting until the Baltic fleet arrived in Japan. On February 6, 1904, the Japanese Navy captured 2 Russian ships off the coast of Busan. On February 8, an advance party of the Japanese army landed in Incheon, Korea, where a small battle took place between the Japanese and Russian navies. This was the first battle. Russia condemned the attack before the declaration of war, but the attack after diplomatic relations were severed was legal under international law at the time. The Allied fleet wanted to have a decisive battle with the Lushun fleet before the Baltic fleet arrived and win or lose. Of course, the Lushun fleet, waiting for the Baltic fleet, did not want to play the game and stayed back in the port of Lushun. Therefore, Togo and other leaders of the Allied fleet planned to sink a ship at the entrance of Lushun port and confine the Lushun fleet inside Lushun port. This was the operation to block the port of Lushun. Initially, Togo expressed his reluctance to this operation, as it was difficult to expect soldiers to return alive. This was because the entrance to Lushun port was right in front of Lushun fortress, and ships could easily be shelled from the fortress. The act of sinking a ship in front of the enemy is like going to your death. However, Togo authorized the operation for the Russian Navy, which did not come out of Lushun. In order to determine the personnel for this operation, the Navy conducted a recruitment drive for personnel for important covert operations that were difficult to survive. For this application, there were 10 times as many applicants. It is said that the Naval Command was so impressed with the high morale of the soldiers that they thought this war could be won. 21 ships, or 10% of Japan's merchant ships of 1,000 tons or more, were used in this blockade operation. 3 attacks were made, but none of them resulted in the ship being discovered by the Russians, being hit by Russian shells before reaching the harbor entrance, sinking herself, and failing to effectively confine the Lushun fleet inside Lushun harbor. The 2 Marines who became famous at this time were Lieutenant Colonel Hirose and Marine Sugino, who were engaged in the second blockade operation. After the first blockade operation failed, the second operation took place in the early morning of March 27. The second mission was also discovered and shelled by the Russians before they could reach the harbor entrance. Illuminated by searchlights from the fortress of Port Arthur, the ships that were spotted were shot at one by one. Hirose's ship was torpedoed by a Russian destroyer before it could reach the entrance of the port, which was suitable for blockade, and almost sank. Hirose had no choice but to order everyone to leave. After getting into the lifeboat and making sure everyone was safe, Sugino was not there. While even the lifeboats are about to be bombarded, Hirose, despite his rank as a lieutenant commander, returns to the ship alone to look for Sugino. Where's Sugino? Where's Sugino? In the end, Sugino is not found, and Hirose tries to return to the boat, but a shell hits him in the head, killing him instantly. His compassion for his men quickly spread throughout Japan, and he was worshipped as the god of war. Although it failed to contain the Lushun fleet in the harbor, the Lushun fleet stayed in Lushun until the Baltic fleet arrived, guaranteeing control of the Sea of Japan for the time being. Thus, the preparations for the Japanese army to cross over to the Korean peninsula were complete, and the next step was to progress to land battles. The following is an explanation of the army's battle. If you enjoy it, please subscribe to the channel and click the like button.